So in today's video, we are going to be discussing just the craziness that is the AFC West. Now, before we get into the video, please consider liking and subscribing. And without wasting any more time, let's just jump right into the video. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys have been paying attention to NFL and the free agency. I know for the past few days when I'm not working, I'm just constantly on my phone refreshing to see what Ian Rappaport, Adam Schefter, see what all those guys are saying, because I kind of want to keep up with the news just in case any big time acquisition, trade, or signing goes down. But as you could see with the AFC West, it just feels like it's elevated this year, because it really does feel like every single team in the AFC West is going completely all out and trying to become a better team and compete with the Chiefs. Now, because the Chiefs have just owned that division for the past 6 years, and they've owned the Broncos in particular for 13 straight games. The Broncos haven't beat them since 2015. So teams have been looking up to the Chiefs. They've been trying to compete with the Chiefs for at least 4 years now, and they just seem to never be able to get over that hump. And it really feels like this offseason that they're trying to, because if you look at the Chiefs, their situation when it comes to the cap, while I do believe in totality that I think the cap in a way is a myth, because I've seen teams work around it, it seems like there is ways that it does have its limitations. It's definitely hitting the Chiefs right now. The Chiefs are definitely running into issues with limitations right now, because they have issues at defensive end that they definitely need to fill. They haven't been able to fill because they had to restructure Frank Clark's contract and they had to keep him there. Whereas if it wasn't going to be an issue with the dead cap and all the dead money, I'm sure they would have been perfectly fine moving off of Frank Clark. But with the restructure, the contract looks a lot better compared to his production, so it kind of matches Frank Clark and what he's been doing the last couple of years. So that situation got kind of figured out. And then you also have them filling Tyrann Mathieu's hole on the defense, which he probably isn't going to come back. I mean, he hasn't been signed yet as of me recording this video, which I find to be completely crazy, because a guy of Tyrann Mathieu's caliber, you're not going to find it anywhere else. So the fact that he hasn't been signed, I think is just absolutely insane right now. But you just look at the Chiefs, they have their own issues that they're still trying to figure out. They sort of figured out the safety situation. They still have to fix the defensive line. They still have to get a corner, and they're still looking at a wide receiver. So compared to the moves that the Chiefs have been making to these other teams, they look like they're going to be behind, but that's really not the case, because they're in the process of trying to extend Tyreek Hill now. They still have Travis Kelce. They have McCole Hardman, who I think had a breakout season and is slowly progressing, becoming a better option on the offense every single year that he's in the NFL. He's gotten steadily better. You look at certain games, like there's a game that was circulating Twitter the other day of the game against the Buffalo Bills, not this past year, but the year before in the AFC Championship game, where he muffed the punt, and then that very next drive, they just kind of fed him the ball. And you can see with McCole Hardman that he's constantly becoming better, constantly becoming a more reliable guy on the offense. So the Chiefs themselves, they're not really falling behind. It's just everybody is catching up. I don't think the Chiefs are falling behind. They still have Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in the NFL, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, the best offensive line in that division probably. That offensive line was completely revamped in an entire offseason, when usually it could take years. And you look at teams like the Giants, who've been trying to do it for years, and the Chiefs were able to do it in one offseason. So you have the Chiefs, who I don't think are falling behind the competition. It's just guys are catching up to them. And they still have Chris Jones. They have a great linebacking core. And it looks like their secondary, they're slowly starting to get figured out. They still need corners. So the Chiefs aren't falling behind. They have Andy Reid. They have Eric Bieniemy still. They brought in Matt Nagy, whereas most people don't like him as a head coach. When he was the offensive coordinator in 2017, he definitely made his presence felt. And having him back, I think, is just only going to elevate the Chiefs offense in more ways than one. But that's just the Chiefs side of things. Let's look at some other teams in the AFC West. Let's look at the Broncos. Obviously, the Broncos went huge in bringing in Russell Wilson. Now, yes, Russell Wilson had a down year in Seattle. He didn't look like the Russ that we thought he could be. And he wasn't playing up to what he could last year. But again, he was injured last year. So I don't know if we could really take anything that happened last year in Seattle as anything serious. Like, bringing in Russell Wilson just changes the entire landscape of not only the Broncos, the division, but the conference, because now you have another team that is viable in this conference that is already loaded at quarterbacks and very talented teams. If I'm a free agent quarterback right now, going to the AFC would be the worst thing that I would want to do, because you have a gauntlet of quarterbacks that you're constantly going to have to face every single week, and it's not going to stop. It's bang, 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 bang. Now, for the NFC side of things, I'm sure they're happy about it, because you have us on the AFC just beating each other up every single week, and they're just being like, oh, well, we just have Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, and Tom Brady. Like, we can just, play our game every single week, and we don't have any cares in the world. We'll just meet each other in the playoffs, and then we'll face you in the Super Bowl, and you guys are already beat to hell. So adding Russell Wilson just adds another team to the fire that is the AFC that I think is contending. Some people don't think they contend, which I don't think is a fair criticism at all of the Broncos. I think the Broncos, what they've done, just bringing in Russell Wilson, is just absolutely insane, and just it changes the Broncos team as a whole, because I thought they were a quarterback away from last year because they had an amazing defense. Their offense was just absolutely pathetic and disgusting to watch. So I think adding Russell Wilson changes the entire complexion of the season that's coming up for the entire AFC West. And you have also them bringing in Nathaniel Hackett from the Packers, who I think is definitely going to help this offense. Like, you can bring in Russell Wilson with Vic Fangio, but I think bringing in Nathaniel Hackett is definitely going to elevate this offense, because the defense is already great, because you have guys like Bradley Chubb, Justin Simmons, and Pat Surtain who are already on the team, and then you add guys like Randy Gregory and DJ Jones. You're adding more talent to a roster that I feel like was a Super Bowl caliber defense that they had last year in Denver. So I think just adding Russell Wilson to this offense just changes them into a legitimate contender. Which brings me to the Chargers, who are not a bad football team. No, their defense was absolutely garbage. I'm not going to hide any facts about that. Their defense, their run defense, was a mess last year. But I definitely think they've got that figured out, and they're slowly working on that. But you just look at the Chargers last year. They got in their own way in the final week of the season. If they honestly would have not called that timeout, they probably would have been in the playoffs with the Raiders and making 3 teams of the AFC last year go to the playoffs, which I thought the division was already kind of tough last year. But everything that the teams have been doing now, I think it makes it even tougher. But you look at what the Chargers did. They extended Mike Williams, who you could argue is their best wide receiver on their team. They added Khalil Mack to their team, who in 7 games last year had 6 sacks. They signed J.C. Jackson, possibly the best corner in the entire NFL. And then they added Sebastian Joseph Day to their defensive line. So they've definitely solved as many issues as they possibly could. They have a great pass rusher. They have an interior defensive lineman that's definitely going to help with that run defense that was just absolutely pathetic and garbage last year. Again, they extended Mike Williams, who had a 1,000-yard receiving season without even having 50 catches. He had 76 catches, 1,146 yards, 9 touchdowns last year, obviously solidifying himself as a guy who deserves to be paid top dollar wide receiver money, and he got that. And then you have Joey Bosa and Derwin James, who are already on that defense. That, those are 2 spectacular players. And then you bring on the fact that Justin Herbert, talent-wise, might be one of the top 5, definitely top 10 quarterbacks in the entire NFL right now. Justin Herbert is not the reason why the Chargers fail at all. If you look at anything the Chargers did, I like Brandon Staley. He brings an aggressiveness and something to the NFL that teams were doing, but they really were scared to do. But he made going for it on 4th down the identity of the entire Chargers team, which I find to be absolutely crazy, that a guy going for it on 4th down, even when it didn't make sense in his own territory, week 18, when it mattered, he still did it. He knows what he wants to do, and he's gonna do it. Fails or not, bad situation or not, he's going to do it. Now, do I agree with it? No, it got on my nerves last year from a fan perspective, just seeing a guy constantly go for it on 4th down time and time and time again. Now, for the guys on the field, I'm sure they loved it. But just from a fan perspective, it's not helping your team necessarily as much as you think it does. Because if you're really aggressive and it works, you're crowned as a genius. If it fails, you're going to get called an idiot, because that's just how it works. And when you have a guy like Justin Herbert, who is not even close to the reason why you failed as a team last year, I find you've got to do more for Justin Herbert. Like, you look what he did on that one drive where he was converting fourth down after fourth down after fourth down after fourth down, where they had to go for it on fourth down. Obviously, Justin Herbert on that drive alone showed that, man, this dude is talented. This dude is going to be a franchise quarterback. He could make it to a Super Bowl. But the Chargers, they had to fix the things around him, and it looks like they finally did. I mean, that you still have the factor the Chargers are going to charger, because that just seems what they do. They outcharger themselves every single week, and they find a way to do it. But I think they definitely took a step forward, and I think the Chargers are still going to be a team that's going to be a pain to deal with. They're a tough opponent for the Chiefs. They were twice last year. They split the season series with the Chiefs last year. So I think the Chargers are going to be a very tough team coming up, and it's going to be very fun to watch them play week in and week out. Which brings me to the final team, which you could argue is the fourth best team in the division, but honestly you could argue is a top 7 team in the entire conference. That is the Raiders. Now, the Raiders, obviously, they had a whole bunch of dysfunction last season. They had John Gruden. They had a whole bunch of players, Henry Ruggs, Arnett. They all got in trouble constantly. It was nonstop drama with the Raiders last season. But Rich Bisaccia deserves all the love in the world for the fact he got them into the playoffs, and they were honestly an interceptions away from possibly knocking off the Bengals in the playoffs. If Derek Carr doesn't throw that interception, I really do think that the Raiders have a solid chance of moving on and becoming a team that is a legit contender and somebody that's dangerous down the playoffs. Because a team like the Raiders is not somebody you want to play, because a team that is going through that much drama, that much adversity, and they're able to push through and they're able to make the playoffs, it's just absolutely insane. I wouldn't want to play them, because they're playing a team that has nothing to lose. Because Rich Bisaccia, he deserves all the love in the world. There was a chance that he wasn't going to come back, and he didn't. So a lot of these guys have nothing to lose. So they just went out there, they played, and they were one interception away from continuing in the playoffs. Now, I guess you could argue that Derek Carr is a bad quarterback. Again, I'm as a Chiefs fan, I probably shouldn't say this, but I don't think Derek Carr is as bad as we try to make him out to be. I don't think Derek Carr is as high. I think he's too highly regarded by some people, but I think he gets a little bit too much hate from other people. He's definitely a good quarterback, and if the Raiders right now in this offseason and this quarterback market move off of him, they're very dumb. So I don't think there's any reason for the Raiders to move off. Now, I think they need to get wide receiver help, obviously because of the issues with Henry Rugg last year, and they've lost him. So they need to get him some wide receiver help. But moving off of Derek Carr in this division would be very stupid. Moving off a guy that's very familiar with his opponents would be very, very dumb. But then you look at what the Raiders did this offseason just so far. They extended Max Crosby and they signed Chandler Jones, which I think is going to help that defense, which was definitely hit or miss. Like when they played the Chiefs last year, they just absolutely got blown out. And as much, if we're talking my Chiefs side of things, I loved every single second of that. If we're watching the football side of that, the Raiders had a whole bunch of issues that they had to fix. Now, Chandler Jones, he is an older guy. We don't know what his production is going to be like, but he did have 10.5 sacks last year. But, 5 of those came in week 1 against the Tennessee Titans. So you can kind of argue that, hey, these games, those don't really count in the grand scheme of things, of anything, because it's week 1. People don't talk about week 1 later in the season. But you put him next to Max Crosby, who, again, I think is definitely, I think people say he's inconsistent at times. The one game that I fully watched him play and was hardcore invested in it because it was the final game of the season was against that Chargers team, and he was making plays constantly in that game. So from the one time I really truly got to sit down and just watch him play, he played a fantastic game. So adding those two guys together, I think is definitely going to help this defense that was definitely hit or miss sometimes. But then you also have the biggest thing is they added Josh McDaniels as their head coach. He was with New England. He won all those Super Bowls with New England. And he's finally going to have the freedom that he didn't have in New England to just run an offense that he really wanted to, because everything went through Bill Belichick. Now he gets to run the offense that he wants to run. And I think Josh McDaniels can definitely elevate the Raiders into somebody that's a viable contender. I think he can get the best out of Derek Carr. I mean, I really do think that Josh McDaniels is going to make this Raiders offense into something that it could be considered special. Do I hope it happens? Hell no. I hope none of this happens. I hope all 3 of these teams, the Broncos, Chargers, Raiders, are all garbage next season. I hope they fall in the pits, and I hope they're all fighting for the number 1 overall pick. But just as Josh McDaniels is a coach, I think we're going to see what Josh McDaniels is. We're going to see what Bill Belichick did. We'll see how much influence Bill Belichick had. We're going to see all the things that Josh McDaniels can bring as a head coach. And I really do think that the Raiders adding an offensive mind like Josh McDaniels, a guy that has had success time and time and time again, I really do think helps the Raiders. And I think as a whole, all these moves, all of these teams made just solidifies the argument that the AFC West is easily the toughest division in football. Get out of here with the NFC West stuff. I'm not buying that. The only real team in there right now is the Rams. What do we know about Kyler Murray and the Cardinals? Jimmy Garoppolo, I like him a lot more than most people, but again, what are the 49ers? And then you have the Seahawks with nobody. So I truly do think that the AFC West is the toughest division in all of football.